In September of last year, in Lagos, Nigeria, a church hostel collapsed, killing 116 people. The church and some of its engineers have just gone on trial. However, if you followed the coverage of this story in the Nigerian media along the way, you would have thought they were absolved of any guilt. There is a syndrome in the country known as brown envelope journalism. It's when journalists accept bribes. Typically, the cash comes in brown envelopes, hence the name. And they alter the way that they report the story. Ostensibly, the money is to cover a journalist's travel costs and other expenses. However, the understanding is clear. The money affects the way the story is reported. And that is allegedly what happened with the hostel last year. Now, it's easy to condemn journalists for taking bribes, but like most stories of corruption, the reality is that there are complexities involved. Nigerian journalists are among the worst paid reporters in Africa, and that's when they actually do get paid. In a country where corruption tends to trickle from the top down, rooting it out of any single institution, such as the news media, is easier said than done. The Listening Post's Nick Muirhead now from Lagos, the media capital of Africa's most populous country.
September 2014. Nigerian journalists raced to the scene of a collapsed church hostel on the outskirts of Lagos. More than 100 worshippers had come there to see one of Nigeria's best-known evangelists, TB Joshua. They now lay dead beneath the rubble. Eager for details and prevented from accessing the site, the journalists sought out the pastor.
So he came out and was like, okay, can you tell us, say something? Somebody said no, he wasn't going to say anything, but we should go there and say the positive things that the church was doing about the tragedy.
And as every journalist was leaving, they were handed an envelope, which I think had a 50,000 naira, which is about $200-300 roughly.
And I was aghast because when he mentioned money, journalists immediately changed and they were suggesting to him what he should say and what he should do.
The brown envelopes worked. Here's what many Nigerian news outlets focused on in the days after the tragedy: that there was a mysterious aircraft hovering above the building before it collapsed, that the militant group Boko Haram may have been responsible, and that TB Joshua called the victims martyrs of the kingdom of God. Here's what went largely unreported: that 4 floors had been added to the 2-story building illegally, leaving it structurally flawed, and that members of the church had possibly hindered first responders when the rescue operation began. Later, the Lagos State Coroner would say that the church was criminally negligent, an assertion the evangelist's followers refused to accept, and a far cry from the whitewashing that went on in the Nigerian media.
Nobody was asking critical questions. On the Saturday, I woke up in the morning and the first picture I saw on my phone was the then president, Goodluck Jonathan, shaking hands with TB Joshua. And the news said he has gone for a condolence visit to the church. Let's call it a gift.
That was the final straw for Nicholas Ibekwe, who was one of the reporters at the scene that day. He says that he did not accept a brown envelope, and that after reading the coverage of the tragedy, felt compelled to expose the cover-up. He tweeted that the pastor had bribed journalists and backed up the claim with an audio file that allegedly confirms TB Joshua paying off the media. The pastor has not commented on the authenticity of the recording, not publicly and not in response to our questioning. But the backlash to the claim online was swift, and the most scathing attacks, says Ibekwe, came from journalists.
People wrote damaging articles about me, and I was like, what are they writing about? We're talking about 116 lives here. And the only thing you people could see was if I was trying to become famous by that. I broke a story. This man bribed journalists. You listening to the audio. You saw him say he was giving them 50,000 naira each.
There was a big kerfuffle about it on social media because journalists get very uncomfortable. Those who collect brown envelopes get very uncomfortable when there's one who doesn't, because it shows them off. And I think deep down inside they feel a sense of shame, and they do know that what they're doing is wrong.
This July, the state government in Lagos chose not to prosecute the church for criminal negligence, but rather slapped it with the misdemeanor charge of failing to obtain the requisite permit. Nigerian journalists often acquiesce to brown envelope journalism due to their financial situations. The average salary, we are told, is 40,000 naira or $200 a month. That is less than the bribe that TB Joshua allegedly offered last year. And sometimes journalists are not paid at all. In July this year, the Nigerian Union of Journalists protested outside the premises of the This Day newspaper in Lagos to demand the payment of salaries owed to its members, going back 9 months. We tried numerous times to arrange an interview with the owner, editor, or managing director of This Day, but nobody was made available. So we went to the paper's offices to try our luck. We've just been to the This Day offices here in Lagos to find posters on the windows outside saying that the company is under investigation. There were very few journalists inside the building. One of them told me that the company does not condone brown envelope journalism and that the wage dispute will be resolved by the end of the month. But what we've also been told here in Nigeria is that not every journalist means what they say, what they report. I contacted the same journalist at the This Day newspaper a month later and was told that the wage dispute was still ongoing and that ultimately, when journalists are not paid, they are left with very little choice but to fend for themselves.
Whole political economies are run like that, where for the government to save money, they expect public officials to supplement their incomes by taking bribes from the public. Now, the media is one of the drivers of the political economy of Nigeria, and you could often feel sorry for journalists who have not been paid for a while or are even encouraged by their publishers. Look, I've not paid your salary, you go earn an income. And that is one way of publishers saying, brown envelope journalism is there. If I don't pay you, you're going to make your money anyway.
There is a saying that the music that hunger plays in your stomach makes you deaf to reason. You don't begin to preach ethics to a hungry man. Therefore, when journalists are not paid, they are prone to being compromised. I'm not saying that it's only those who are not paid that take brown envelopes. Even some who are well paid still do.
Which gets to the root of the problem. Transparency International is an NGO that analyzes how corrupt the country's public sector is perceived to be. In its 2014 index, Nigeria ranked 136 out of 175. There is systemic corruption in Nigeria that goes far beyond journalism. The brown envelopes are just a symptom.
Corruption has eaten deeply into the fabric of Nigerian society, and journalism is part and parcel of the Nigerian society. Nigerian journalists are Nigerians, so it's no wonder that they've been infected as well by this disease that is affecting everything else.
A lot of editors and publishers try as much as possible to stay within the realm of verifiable fact and correct news reporting. But remember, you have a corruptor and a corruptee. It is in the interest of those who dominate the political economy of Nigeria to corrupt the journalists.
Make yourself a honest man, and there is one crook less in the world. So when you have resolved to be an ethical journalist, then it affects the industry in one way or the other. So if majority of journalists decide to be ethical, then the image and reputation of the profession is being cleaned.
Journalism is meant to hold power to account, but as long as airtime and column inches are up for sale in Nigeria,
So what are you going to write now?
then journalism will reinforce corruption in the country. But not all journalists are for sale. Some have become the watchdogs of their own profession, and that for now is a start.